Hello, my name is Janet Brown. I'm a team manager for the Duty and Assessment Service in an inner city known as the Response Team. In the team we deal with all the emergency issues in relation to child protection that come in every day. We deal with these in two ways. We do Section 17 assessments and we do Section 47 assessments. On the whole, our work tends to be Section 47 based immediate child protection concerns. We also deal with all the referrals that come from across the city, which may come from schools, from health, and from any other agency that may refer to us. We do the Section 47 investigations, sometimes single agency, but on the whole we work with the Police Child Abuse Investigation Unit.
My name is Brian Wilson. I'm from the Police Child Abuse Investigations Unit. The unit itself has 2 detective inspectors, 4 sergeants comprising of 4 separate teams, anywhere between 7 to 9 staff at the time. Our responsibility is to look at 4 main areas of child abuse, which is anything to do with physical, sexual, emotional or neglect issues. We go out as a joint team, such as Detective Constable like myself and somebody from Janet's team. It's important to note that social services are the lead agencies in any child protection inquiry, not the police. In respect of training in mental health issues, police officers that are studying for a degree are given a broad introduction to mental health and the legislation that covers it. This is important as it will be the police who are often called to somebody who is not behaving normally in the street, becomes violent as a result. We may have to take somebody into custody for their own protection and welfare, as well as for those who own property around them. Officers need to remember that they need to be prepared for anything, such as people taking their clothes off. However, I should say it's very much on-the-job training.
Another issue we have to deal with is if domestic violence is disclosed. If Sandra discloses that she's a victim of domestic violence, we will need to first of all talk to her away from the home. We need to remember that when speaking to women who have suffered from domestic violence, they need space to talk. They won't disclose to us if they're at home. What I tend to do is find a safe place to speak to women and just talk through their whole history, as you may find that they've experienced violence in their childhood. She may be able to warm better to a woman as men have been violent towards her. We need to try and break that cycle, but before we could break it, we need to understand it and encourage her to understand it as well. There's lots of different reasons why women tend to choose partners of the same type. What she does need to understand though is that she's an adult. She can choose to be in this abusive relationship. However, her children have no choice. They're being forced into that situation by the actions of their parents. She needs to know quite clearly that if the domestic violence is influencing her children, we will be looking at child protection measures. However, at some point I'll be talking to her partner too, because there's no point in avoiding perpetrators in domestic violence. In fact, social workers always talk to perpetrators at some point during their assessment. It could be argued that the partner may be a protective factor. What we'll have to do is to look at him in isolation. Who knows, maybe Sandra was the perpetrator of domestic violence and he was just retaliating. We don't know, so we have to give him a chance to answer those questions. The real assessment will be asking the children what's happening when they're being looked after by their father. I'd also want to look at the couple's history, look at police records, etc. Sandra has told us that she's had involvement with a social worker in the past. It would be necessary to look into where she had previously lived and check with other authorities. I'd also be checking with schools, previous health visitors, to find out as much as possible about her life. I'd also speak to her mum, because she would help us to learn more about her daughter's history.
Sandra's been picked up in a public place drunk. She was arrested and could have been put into custody, although she wasn't. However, she was taken to Accident and Emergency Department. The records show that she's been involved in neglecting children, i.e. leaving them at home. It's the police officer's responsibility to refer this to the Child Abuse Investigation Referral Desk. It would then be shared with the Duty and Assessment Desk. We would then have to ask ourselves a very important question. Who's looking after Sandra's children while she is in a heavily intoxicated state? It may sound quite strange, but the criminal element is not the most important thing for the police. Detecting crime or prosecuting people is not our main aim here. It's much more important to understand the situation and see what's going on. We can only do that by a joint visit. We would potentially do an unannounced visit to the home address, but we would also want to speak to a mother, speak to the partner, etc. From that we would obtain consent, although we don't legally need it for Section 47 to speak to the children at school. The children themselves are 16, 11 and 13. It will be necessary to talk to them and probably record a few DVDs of these talks. However, we should not speak to children at police stations. They might feel like they have done something wrong. It's better to talk to children somewhere where they would feel comfortable and be relaxed. It would then be my job to ask them questions and write down their answers. I would use open questions. I'd probably start our conversation by asking, "Tell me about your daily routine. What happens when you get up?" From there, you will find out where their mum is. Is she still in her bed drunk? Is dad asleep? What access do children have to bread, milk and cereals? Who gives them money for school meals? This would give you an open and truthful account on what's going on in their homes. You must also always present yourself as being open and honest. Honesty and truthfulness with children is probably the most important thing. You need to gain their trust, which can take a long time. When I'm undertaking an investigation, I'll need a range of outside agencies, for example health and education. If I was going to go to a school to find out more about the children, I would certainly make contact with a school in person and see who's directly responsible for child protection there. They would officially have to share any child protection concerns with you. If it was the midwife or health visitor I needed to liaise with, I would have to find out who their direct manager was. However, I would always try to make a personal contact with them, because many midwives, doctors and nurses would see me as a threat, as a representative of the law, and personal contact would be absolutely necessary here in order to make them feel comfortable. If I wanted medical notes, I would go to the safeguarding team at the hospital if the child's been born there. It's necessary to give them a chance to prepare all the notes, because what I would be asking for is a complete photocopy of all medical records. That goes for the GP, health visitor. You'll encounter some resistance from midwives because midwives actually carry with them a diary. They are very, very reluctant to give it up because you might find some comments there which they would not necessarily want to share. I've had to go to court in order to get them to release them. So you may have to stand and say, "Listen, I need those notes because the basic question is, why are you not willing to surrender them?" We have to, by law, share the information. Everything that's recorded in the police force we have to share with social services. There might be some negative information in there, but we need to see everything because it could be important.
As far as sharing information, we are governed by the Data Protection Act. We're not going to share everything, but we will share what's needed when it's needed. We can only release the information of the third party if it's been agreed by the third party. Information sharing is becoming the minefield at the moment. Authorities are being criticised for sharing information they probably shouldn't have shared. Therefore, with each case, you need to be very, very clear about what information you're sharing and why. You have to have a reason for sharing the information. One of the big obstacles is when we know that the perpetrator is a sex offender, but we're not sure at what point we do need to share this information. So I'd say as a social worker you have to be very careful and take ownership for what you're sharing, because it's not your information to share, but at the same time balancing this with the protection of the child.